I invite you to stand for the reading of the Gospel. Today comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 13, verses 24 through 37. Jesus is speaking and says that in those days, after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of God coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out the angels and gather the elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as the branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that Jesus is near, at the very gates. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day and hour, no one knows. Neither the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only God. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It's like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Therefore, keep awake. For you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or a cockcrow, or at dawn. Or else he will find you asleep when he suddenly comes. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Growing up, summer road trips in my family were an adventure. I vividly remember piling into our black 1968 Ford Galaxy 500 to drive from my hometown in Monterrey, Mexico, to either Mexico City or to Guadalajara to visit relatives for vacation. It was my little brother and I who were in elementary school at the time, my two sisters who were in college. My older brothers were already married and out of the house. The trip to either destination, either Mexico City or Guadalajara, was going to take about 12 hours. And it was a given that my dad wanted to get there in one day, which of course meant a very early morning to get ready to get out. There was a process. There was a procedure, a routine to these trips. Mom orchestrated rounding up all the troops. She made sure that we had packed our bags the night before, so we were ready to go. She made sure we didn't starve on the way, so we had food for snacks on the way, and we had some sort of lunch already packed, maybe some sandwiches or something that we would eat whenever we would stop in our midday stop. In my little kid mind, my mom thought of everything. As for my dad, the car was his domain. The previous evening, my dad had gone to the gas station and filled the tank. Often he would make sure that the car was washed that evening. The morning of the trip, us kids, we would sleepily go down to the garage and set our bags on the garage by the back of the car, on the trunk. Because it was my dad who was responsible to make sure all the bags, all the coolers, everything fit into the trunk. In my little kid mind, my dad could fit the whole house in that trunk. And so with the sun maybe just now rising, the car warming up in the garage, Mom and Dad would gather us in the entryway of the house, and the doors were open. And there we would gather in a circle, and my mom would already have the Bible ready. And she would give it to one of us kids to read Psalm 121, which starts, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. And then that psalm ends with, the Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore. And when the psalm was done, then mom or dad would pray, and then we would get in the car. The trip, the drive was part of the full experience. The vacation started the moment we drove away. Now, mind you, these were not first-class accommodations. It was a spacious car, but it was 4 adults and 2 children. And there was no air conditioning in that car. My dad hardly ever played the radio. I remember my children were so amazed that there were no DVD players in the car for the trip. If I read in the car, I would get sick, so I didn't do that. So we did the kinds of things you expect we would have done. We talked, we sang, we played, we fought, we ate, we slept. Eager as we were to get there, we fully experienced the trip all the way to our destination. Now, if as a church, all we cared about was our destination, then this season of Advent, which begins today, would be nothing but a boring car drive we just suffered through. But in fact, Advent is the adventure for which God has prepared us. With Advent, there is kind of a double waiting. The word Advent comes from a Latin word that means arrival, right? Like Marietta was sharing. So of course, we think of Christmas. We think of the waiting and the anticipation for the arrival of Christ to arrive as a child in the manger. We count the days, whether there is a calendar that rewards us with a little piece of chocolate for every day we wait, or whether we have a devotional which helps us focus on the themes of hope and of love and of joy and of peace. We make plans for special events happening at the church, whether it's a Christmas pageant or Christmas music for the Christmas Eve service. Then there's a kind of waiting that's different. It's a larger kind of waiting. Specifically, as the gospel is talking about in the lesson, it's a return of Jesus to earth, what we talk about as the second coming. Yeah, there's no chocolate calendar for that waiting. We don't know when that will be. It's harder with that kind of anticipation because you don't know when it's happening. How do you keep the spirits up? It calls for a different kind of preparation, perspective, and planning. It's hard to stay focused and motivated for that kind of waiting. And so as the gospel describes, our Advent waiting isn't sitting around watching the scenery pass by on a boring car drive. Instead, it's active, it's urgent, it's watchful work. The word adventure shares a common root with the word Advent. It comes from a Latin word which means something is about to happen. And so the watchfulness of Advent translates into our Christian adventure. If you've ever heard somebody say, every day is Christmas, I would say actually, every day is a part of Advent. Part of our faithful work to prepare for how God will be at work in our lives and in the lives of people in the community. The adventure is that there are things happening all the time. All the time, God is breaking forth into our reality, even in the midst of our larger waiting for the arrival of Jesus. And so the work of the church is this adventure, is to notice where God is already at work, and then to catch up, to God, to run to catch up to where God is, to join in the work. Our ministry as a congregation is not to bring God to people, but to recognize God is already there with the people. Our job is to join God in what God is already doing in blessing them. And God is not just sitting around waiting for us, twiddling fingers. God is encouraging, lifting up, embodying that hope, love, joy, and peace we resonate with in Advent. And so as we run to catch up to where God is at work in our community, the Apostle Paul encourages us in a way that should be transformative to the way we think about our faith. God has equipped each one of us for this journey. Though Paul is writing to the people in Corinth, we hear echoes for ourselves. And we hear that we are not lacking in any spiritual gift for this adventure in ministry. It may be intimidating. After all, we think that we have this challenging adventure unfolding daily before us, and we ponder if we remember to pack everything we needed. But with the faith and heart of a child, we realize that God already thought of everything and packed for us everything we needed for our journey. Paul offers us a different kind of Advent adventure. Paul is saying it is a communal perspective of preparation. What it means by that is, it's not just my little suitcase that has everything I need for the trip, but rather everything in the trunk is what we will all need on the trip. All the gifts and talents we need are in this car as we drive together. And so Paul offers us a hopeful kind of waiting and preparation. It's focused on God's abundance, an abundance that has been bestowed on a congregation, on a community. It is an Advent that is attentive to where God is at work, no matter what agenda we might want to lay over it. And it's an Advent that is faithful work because we work together to discern where God is active in the world around us. We are in the midst of an adventure. And our role is to watch for where God is active, embodying the hope, love, joy, and peace we think about in Advent. Remember that collectively we are not lacking in any spiritual gift to be able to join God in this faithful work. And for that we give God thanks.